Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out to check out the Native Stage, Indigenous Food Lab stage today. So happy to see you all here. My name is Trish Cook. I'm the MC today, and I have the pleasure of introducing our next guests. We are having a panel discussion led by Freddie Bitsoie. And a little bit about Freddie. Freddie is a proud Dine and award-winning chef. Bitsoie is currently chef-in-residence at North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, otherwise known as NATIFS, in Minneapolis. He is the former executive chef at the Native Foods Cafe located inside Washington, D.C.'s Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. Bitsoie was previously the executive chef of Fire Rock Casino and is the winner of the Smithsonian's Native Chef Competition. He is the author of New Native Kitchen, and he has contributed to a number of Native American cookbooks. The Cookbook and James Beard Award-winning Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen. He recently moved from Gallup, New Mexico to Minneapolis. Please welcome Freddie and our awesome panelists here. Have a great day. Thanks for coming out, folks.
Is this thing on? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name's Freddie. I don't need to repeat everything she said, but she was telling you all lies. I really didn't do anything, but for some reason, people hire me to do things, and maybe they just like my personality. I'm not really sure. But we'll see how things go. First of all, I want to welcome you and thank you for being here. It's my first time here at the Minnesota State Fair. Truthfully. So, but in other words, you should be welcoming me, not me welcoming you right now. You're right? Okay. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. I had the pleasure of meeting the four panelists here last week, and we kind of had a really good discussion about how we're going to format this particular program and how we're going to deal with things, but I'm not the important person here. I mean, you're looking at four people here who really do a lot for the community, that have a very big mainstay in the Minneapolis area. So I'm more interested in hearing from them than me talking to you. So let's go ahead and get started. But again, my name is Freddie. I'm Dene. Kabanchlan, I'm not Odenet Kachininch, Butcheshin, not Odenet. I'm sorry, I kind of got my tongue tied. That's who I am. I'm from Gallup, New Mexico, and I am here. Okay, so I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves as well. So let's go ahead and start with the person on my left.
Hello, everybody. My name is Natchez Beaulieu. I'm from the White Earth Nation, and I grew up here in Minneapolis. So I'm an urban native, but I have close ties to the community. My father owns a store, and I work at the Native American Community Clinic. I'm the community engagement coordinator, and I am newly a Ninde doula. So I do work in and around the clinic and in the community. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yes.
Awesome. My name is Destiny Jones. That's my dad.
You have a fan base.
I'm a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin. I am the food sovereignty coordinator and the farmers market manager at Four Sisters NACDI. And I am originally from the Twin Cities, and I have been working within like food systems and food justice for the last few years. So I'm really excited to be here as well.
Hey. Testing. All right. Buju, Anin, Adijinaka, Jawin, Wiju, Migizi Dunadim. Hello, all my relatives. My name is Joseph Vital. My spirit name is South Mountain, and I'm of the Red Lake Nation, Eagle Clan. And shout out to Red Lake. I hear y'all out there. And we the best. Okay, we're all the same, I guess. But yeah, For the past 3 years, I've had the explicit pleasure of fighting for land back and community ownership and community autonomy in South Minneapolis. I'm a proud Mexican, and I look forward every day bringing my multicultural heritage in the fight that I have, and looking forward to this conversation and talking more about the legislative systems that are not only plagued against us, but ways we can fight back.
Kechealeam Inepo Ausei Teak. Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Barela. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at Jima Wild Health. I'm from the Puro-Mansotiwa tribe of Guadalupe Pueblo in New Mexico, the Yoeme Nation of Sonora, and I'm a descendant of the Mackinac Band of Chippewa and Ottawa Indians in Michigan. I've been working, this is my second season at Jima Wild Health. I help manage our Indigenous Food Share program, which is a program that gets out fresh produce from our farm, fresh organic produce, to 90 families in the Twin Cities every week throughout the season. We also have youth programs at our farm where we host youth ages elementary school through just out of high school. We've got our programs throughout the summer where we teach them about growing food, harvesting food, and how to prepare that food into great meals. Yeah, excited to be here and talk with you all. Thank you.
Let's go. Let's go.
That's very nice of you. So the purpose that we're here today, what we're going to discuss is the concept of food sovereignty. It's a new concept to me as a chef because I serve the product. Like I do the final. My job is to feed people. That's what I do. And so I feel that when we talk about food sovereignty, if I don't understand it completely, how do other people understand it, and how the progression of thinking about this particular concept, why is it important? What are the reasons that we talk about food sovereignty? Like, why are we even here to talk about it? So my first question is for Destiny is, how does food sovereignty look in an urban space here in the Twin Cities? I feel weird saying that because I'm not from here, but it's kind of like calling LA and not Los Angeles. So I'll just say here in Minneapolis and St. Paul.
I think that's a really good question as to how we can see land sovereignty, I guess, in any urban space. And I think a lot of it is making the space. I think that having access to just areas, and especially green areas, that allow people to connect to Indigenous lifeways and like knowledge, and to be able to share that knowledge is a really important part of building community, which I think like facilitates so much more of the education and culture that we like hope to kind of see. I think that there can be quite a disconnect between, I guess, traditional ways for urban Indigenous people when we aren't given kind of that access and that space to further collaborate and kind of have like the free reign to like make mistakes and learn from elders and learn from children. And I think that there's just this big drive to create that space. And I think that's something that we try to do at NACDI, at the Native American Community Development Institute, with our urban farm, which is got a community garden and kind of a space for people to be able to grow their own food, as well as a garden that we grow ourselves that we use to teach curriculum off of. And then our farmers market, which we try to bring more access to healthy foods within the space of the American Indian Cultural Corridor on Franklin Avenue, and kind of like, get people a little bit more acclimated to, I guess, all of this knowledge and sharing this knowledge and being able to work with different organizations, I guess, within that space as well.
So would food sovereignty, one of the parts of the definition would be to share a type of knowledge to individuals. How does that relate to, say, for example, if one is Native American or one is African American or one is like, is that interchangeable? Like, do people really have this ability to have food sovereignty regardless of your ethnic background?
I believe so. I think indigenous food sovereignty isn't something that would only, help indigenous people. I believe it's something that can be applicable to all and can, help, the changes that we're seeing in like climate and the different, I guess, aspects that we face, especially in South Minneapolis, like in the arsenic triangle, things like that.
Yeah.
Those are things that affect communities that aren't just indigenous. They affect, our like Mexican neighbors and our Latino community and our like Somali communities and things like that. So I believe, I believe that land's food sovereignty is just kind of trying to meet everyone where they're at and also trying to kind of reap the benefits of kind of revisiting traditional ways and learning from it.
Now, what are some kind of experiences that you've had personally dealing with food sovereignty in this particular area?
Outside of NACDI, I work for a group that serves warm food to encampments around the city, and it's a prominent problem in South Minneapolis, and I think that it's really interesting to see food sovereignty work within these communities that are kind of without traditional resources, and it's really kind of nice to be able to like build community with like these communities that are constantly being displaced in our neighborhood, and also the exchanging of information and the feedback. One of the people that I would really often visit when I was doing distributing the food would be really excited to be trying new vegetables and new different dishes. And I know that that's something that, like, when you have a really limited amount of money and a really limited amount of resources, isn't something that's entirely possible. And so that's always something that I try to keep in mind when even just at the farmer's market. Like, how can we make these things more accessible and more welcoming to communities that aren't traditionally used to using them or, haven't been exposed to it, yes.
Okay. So for describe some of the factors, Anthony, that influence food systems.
Oh, wow.
I know that's a big question. It's probably going to take you an hour to answer, so let's hear it.
I would say, thinking from a more micro level, so thinking of indigenous food systems, I think having land access is the biggest barrier for a lot of food sovereignty, whether that be land for growing agricultural crops or land for harvesting quote-unquote wild foods or wildlife, things like that. We've had so much of our lands removed from us. We've been removed from our lands and our lifeways through so many factors, compounding factors, for so many generations now that we're pretty, in a way, kind of far removed from our old systems. There's so many factors that go into that. There's a lot of political barriers that go into the land access barriers. A lot of folks aren't as familiar with our traditional foods as they used to be due to the legacy of boarding schools and other American assimilation programs, where a lot of our knowledge, a lot of our lifeways, our seeds have been taken from us, and so we haven't had opportunities to grow our food sovereignty for such a long time.
Excuse me. When we talk about food sovereignty, it seems like land is a big issue. So when someone commoditizes land, like the world is, how do we find ways to go around that? As far as if someone wants to eat corn, they can plant corn, but it belongs on someone else's land. How is there a way to go around that?
Through Dream of Wild Health, we also have a program called the Indigenous Food Network, which is a collaboration between a lot of different local organizations, nonprofits, and agencies, where we're able to form partnerships with maybe a family that has an acre of land where someone can grow corn, or someone has a connection to a farm just outside of the metro area where we can grow things. There's a lot of community garden spaces that people have opened up. It definitely takes a lot of working together, especially in an urban space where land isn't so accessible or available.
I see. So when it comes to land, like there's a lot of things involved with that whole concept. So when it comes to, say, laws, for Joe here, like how is the legislature shaping urban and rural foodways? And, like what's happening here to where, as far as government is concerned, how is it progressing as far as the status of food sovereignty?
No, that's a great question, and they differ in tactics. However, some of the issues remain the same, and I'll go into that in a second. But I'll just preface with, what my brother and sister are saying here, where BIPOC people, specifically Indigenous people, have been historically dispossessed of land, historically restricted from financial institutions to access capital to then purchase land. And then third is just the division of tactics that has been implemented by the U.S. government that we have to name, where we are fighting over scraps. But these are, ingenious ideas that I'm hearing here, both bringing food to our communities. But going back to your question on the state legislature and recognizing all of this, for the rural area, it's the same in respects of we need access. Is the same in the cities. But here in the cities, it's more of redeveloping existing structures because of the minimal amount of space that we have. Take, for example, the Roof Depot project, where we have 7.6 acres. That's not a lot in the grand scheme of things to grow a product. However, it is indoors. It could happen 24/7, 365, where traditional farmers have access to thousands of acres of land. But that's where the issue comes in. So for rural, we have small and mid-sized farmers trying to come into the market, but it's very hard. Who here has tried to buy a house in the past couple years? Do you think you can buy said house? And that is the same thing that farmers are facing, because industrial ag dominates the industry here. And not only that, they are the largest greenhouse emitter in this entire state. So legislation that is happening is focused more on the small and mid-sized farmers and getting them access to capital and streamlining the federal grants that are available, that are another barrier that keeps BIPOC folks from accessing this market, because those applications are not only strenuous, but they have requirements that our people traditionally don't have. As I mentioned, access to capital, and then the foundations to make place. Because the sister said it right, we need that grace to fail. But more importantly, we need that space to thrive as well. And so in the urban area, it's access to redevelopment capital, as I mentioned, for the acquirement of space. But the thing is, whether it's at the rural or in the city, the fight is the same, where we need a broad coalition of people to come together, similar to what you see here on stage. We need our organizers, we need our farmers, we need our politicians all to come hand in hand, because not only are we dealing with the U.S. government, but we're dealing with corporations that lobby against us. So the way to make this happen is simply, in times, just forcibly taking land back, or coming together and fighting and lobbying in unison. And so, in short, the fight is very similar here and there, but the tactics are a little bit different. And how do we make that happen?
So do you feel that the government, like the state government at the lower level, are more against food sovereignty, or is it just a corporation-based type of argument? Like, this is our land, this is what we do, we need to promote more of like a Whole Foods type situation, where they sell themselves on having an appreciation for the earth, the land, and food, but it's necessarily not really affordable, and I, for one, feel that way. So do you feel that's how the government is promoting things in that capacity?
For right now, what I can see is food sovereignty is kind of lip service, and it's something the U.S. government doesn't quite understand. I think even sovereignty and land back is something I'll even admit myself is still learning. Like, I see Rachel Thunder in the crowd, so shout out to Rachel Thunder, who is mentoring me on what land back means, because, you know, what struck me when you asked the sister here, can all BIPOC people exist with land back? And it certainly can, but there is that recognition that it does need to go back into predominantly indigenous hands so that it can be maintained, because we do have access to culture, we do have access to those life ways on how to maintain, but it doesn't mean we all can exist on it and, you know, flourish. But to your question, though, it's an extension of what I just said, where this is often used as a divisioning tactic of, like, we have 7.6 acres of land here. We'll just use Roof Depot as an example. And indigenous people are seen as they have food sovereignty. But that's not necessarily the case where it's just native people thriving. It is for all people to thrive in said space. And, you know, that's where our Latinx people, our relatives can flourish, our East African relatives can flourish, because we all have the bare minimum. What we're asking for is just simply access to clean, healthy foods. And so I don't think it's something they quite get. And it's definitely something industrial ag is afraid of, because what we saw, especially during the COVID crisis, was that food supply shortages were just rampant. It still is today. Why is it $15 for 12 eggs? I don't get it. But it's so expensive because food is so closely tied with the petrodollar. And the fuel prices are exuberant right now, and so food prices are following in suit. But where that can be, the cost can be reduced, is simply growing things where you're at and having access to that. But Whole Foods don't want that. Jeff Bezos don't want that, because that's less money in their pocket and more in ours. That can be a circular economy where we grow the damn thing, our people buy the damn thing, and it's eaten in our communities. The money doesn't get taken out of community, it stays in community. So that is something we got to come together and continue to fight for, because we should have access to our traditional foods. We should have access to, you know, healthy foods at bare minimum, but we shouldn't be priced out, because it's our people being priced out.
No, I agree, because there's some strange reason why you find a Whole Foods only in Beverly Hills.
That's weird, huh?
Yeah, because
Strange phenomenon.
They have to pay their rent, so the rent comes out of the food cost, you know? And I always think supermarkets should always be in a place where they can pay their rent, but still give people the food that they deserve, you know, because nobody should earn food. You know, they need to, everyone deserves food, because that's what we live on. So, like, on that note, how is it, Natchez, that food sovereignty, how do you feel how it impacts indigenous people?
And their health.
Yes.
Yeah, it profoundly affects their health. And like, you know, pre-colonization, we had traditional foods. We didn't have the disparities that we have today. And you know, access to these foods, we collaborate with all these organizations on the panel, and we grow our food. We teach workshops on you know, what traditional foods look like, how to grow foods, and we really want engagement with the community so that they can actually see and do these things for themselves, where they feel empowered to take control of their health and their destiny, basically, and do that through food and our traditional medicines.
A lot of people say food is medicine. How do you feel on that particular subject?
Oh, I absolutely believe food is medicine. Nutrient-rich fruits and vegetables that are grown and things that you can actually digest or process are, you know, directly tied to your health. If you're eating high processed foods and high refined sugars, and it just totally wreaks havoc on your health. And I mean, we see all the disparities of our people. You know, we're given commodities way back when, those weren't meant for us to flourish and thrive. They were meant just to keep us alive. And well, actually, it's a form of genocide. So it's, there's so many layers and so many, things that have happened. But what we need to do is concentrate on this efforts to learn what food sovereignty is, learn how to do these things ourselves, collaborate together, come together, and really work together to take land back, reclaim our spaces, and to grow and teach the next generation. Because my kids are here watching, and my baby went to Cora Kids, and I'm an in-day doula. Recently, I've supported 2 births of young mothers. And I am also a lactation counselor, so I helped with food sovereignty at the very beginning. We got the first latch, and it's like food that is like the first drop is like gold. So it's I am just honored to be in this position to support families and to do the work that we need to do.
That's wonderful, because when I think about, say, for example, you just mentioned with health and Indigenous life, breastfeeding is kind of like one of the first forms of ways of doing food sovereignty, right? It's one of those things that it's a normal part of just being Indigenous, and I've just always known that to be a part of my family and everything. So back in I did a conference in Santa Fe about 6 years ago. And Pueblos and Navajos always tease each other. Like, we have this great repertoire of teasing one another. And this gentleman came up to me and he said, do you know why you Navajos like mutton, right? And apparently he actually gave me some education. He said that the Ute tribe, some Pueblos and Navajos, used to go to the mountains near Durango, Colorado, and hunt big, the rams, the big horn mountain, big horn sheep. And they used to collectively hunt them and process them. So when the Iberians came, or for lack of a better term, the Spanish came, they brought sheep. And it was one of those things where people were kind of like, all the Indigenous people are kind of like, how is it possible that their food is following them? Like, you had products, sheep, cows, they were following the people just so they can get slaughtered and eaten, right? And it was a new concept, like domestication of animals. So when Nauvoo people, Hopi people discovered that the sheep taste just like what they used to hunt for, it was like the first fast food. Like, it was the first McDonald's. So how is it when it comes to food sovereignty that we think about these types of things where people hunted for food, but it gave them some type of activity to do to where they could burn fat, exercise. Whereas in reality, with a corral like 500 yards from your house, you can just go there and grab an animal and butcher it and eat it. So how do you think that impact has a lot to do with, because when I got here, a friend of mine gave me some fruits from her garden, and it was just so easy, And so when it comes to food and health and everything in that capacity, let me give this to you.
Sure.
How do you feel with conveniences? How does convenience affect food sovereignty?
Well, yeah, that's a thing, right? But you still have to be out there every day, maintaining, watering, and tending to the plants. Like, it's not easy. We have a wall garden, and we have things growing around we have the 4 medicines growing around the clinic, and it is a challenge to get out there every day and to keep everything alive. But I think with not that traditionally we didn't always eat meat. Like, we have the 3 sisters, which is corn, beans, and squash. And when you eat those 3 things together, you can synthesize your own protein. You have all the amino acids to make your own protein. So we had ways and knowledge, traditional knowledge, that kept us when we didn't have meat or we didn't have access, we knew ways of taking care of those nutritional needs that we would have.
So Natchez mentions traditional knowledge. So Anthony, how do you feel about this disruption in culture, especially with foodways in the early 20th century? Like, how are we reclaiming these types of knowledge, these types of cultural ways? As far as like, are we reclaiming, or is there anything that you've heard of that people should know about?
Yeah, a lot of us are reclaiming our traditional life ways. It takes a lot of collaboration, as I was saying earlier, because there's not as much land access for us to grow our own food or to harvest our own wild foods anymore. And for people in the city, it takes quite a considerable time to drive out to those spaces too. So it takes a lot of collaboration, and it definitely takes a lot of educating the youth, exposing youth to traditional lifeways and traditional foods, even common vegetables and fruits that maybe weren't traditional in our diets, but are maybe still not super common in a lot of families' households today, because again of that legacy of the boarding schools and the commodity foods that were sent to Native communities, and because of a lot of income disparities that a lot of our communities face, as you were saying, with places like Whole Foods and other mainstream like organic stores. Those don't really serve our communities just due to the income access and location of where those are. Those don't typically be to where our communities are located.
Okay, so this is for anyone. If you can jump in and chime in. How is climate change impacting food sovereignty and indigenous foods?
Oh, that's easy. There's not enough of the land in native hands at the moment. Although, we are less than 1% of just the U.S.'s population. Well, it's slightly more now. Shout out to the census. Do your census. But globally, we maintain 80% of the world's biodiversity. We maintain that. And as climate change not only intensifies, but becomes more prevalent in our everyday life, it jeopardizes the land itself because, I once heard an elder state it as, there are spirits in the land waiting for us to come back to it. And I define this as just like the big ag or even the current agricultural practices that are being implemented today that are eroding our soil health. Soil health is now becoming like an increasingly, big grant discussion in the legislature. And then just also climate resilient, farming practices that are required to sustain said soil health so that the next 7 generations can benefit, so that better practices can be implemented that help and sustain the land, that are in relation to the land. And, another thing that needs to be stated is just the mental that comes with climate change. It's devastating to look out there and it's not even a filter. The air is just orange, and that's messed up. And it's not even us. It's large-scale polluters. It is the fossil fuel industry. And there comes grief with that. And so it's a mental hurdle that sometimes you don't want to go outside. Sometimes you can't because the air is just that bad. And so, as climate change intensifies further, we all need to come together and implement better practices, because not only are communities, but farmers are at the forefront of this crisis. And how do we change what we're doing now so that this can be here 7 generations?
Yeah, the whole 7 generation thing is so very, very. It's a really good philosophy. You have to take care of the people who are going to inherit the earth from people. So when it comes to food sovereignty and that knowledge that you said about traditional knowledge, or other people will call it ancestral knowledge, how do you feel like your community is dealing with doing that type of inheritance of the food sovereignty knowledge?
Well, so at NAC, the CEO, Anthony Stately, he is bringing our traditional medicines right up with the Western medicine. Like they're equal and they're both offered to the clients for getting healthy, right? And then we have food access, we have food shares available from Dream of Wild Health, and I'm on the Indigenous Food Network committee. So we are partnering with many different organizations, local organizations, to have the access directly into the community and supporting each other and doing that. But yeah, it's a team effort, and it's something I feel very passionate about, and I'm still learning too. Like I learn every day, and I can't wait to spend more time with my panelists, friends, and learn more.
So how do you feel about it, Destiny? Like, what is your objective?
I agree with Natchez in the sense that it is a team effort, and I think that's something that this panel has really brought forth to me. Is like I'm sitting amongst all of these people whose organizations I've already worked with in order to bring this type of food access to our communities. Like we've had EPNI table at our farmers market. We work with Dream of Wild Health almost constantly, and we collaborate with being able to give local community members like vouchers to be able to use at the farmers market and things like that with NAC. And at the beginning of the season, we were having a lot of droughts in Minnesota, which was something that affected our farmers, as well as the air quality being really severely bad. And it was constantly a question of if we should run the market just due to these issues. And we had a really insightful email from one of our elders who was kind of
I've never received an exciting email before.
Yeah, it was insightful. I don't know how exciting an email can ever be, but it was one of our vendors, Marcy Rendon, mentioned that climate change is something that we've been anticipating for a really long time, and it's not something that we can view as a temporary inconvenience. It's something that we have to kind of acclimate to, and we have to think of ourselves as Indigenous people and what we can do to go forward to create the world that we want to live in. And I thought about that a lot while I was getting ready for this panel, was that so much of being Indigenous post-colonization has been acclimation. And I don't know, even being able to see the collaboration that's here on this panel is makes me very optimistic that there's a future ahead, regardless of how climate change turns out to affect us.
Interesting. That's a really interesting way to look at it.
It's less daunting. It's less daunting. It's not just you. It's this broad coalition that is working. We got unions coming together in the climate fight. Shout out to the teachers union, nurses union. They all recognize the crisis that we're in. And then more importantly, this resurgence of just Indigenous power that I've been seeing all across the state, all across the nation, of just, not only are we going to learn our teachings, but we're going to implement them and land back. And it's just an amazing time. I'm noticing your phone of just seeing more indigeneity out in the mainstream is it's a beautiful time, but it's one that comes with struggle as well.
Oh, definitely, for sure. So, Anthony, how do your community how are they dealing with the climate change and the effects of the ramifications of it through food sovereignty?
It's taking a lot of adaptation and creative adaptation. I was thinking a little bit earlier with the climate grief. Maple tapping is something that's really affected by climate with the changing temperatures. For those of you that may not be familiar with tapping maple trees.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah. Maple syrup tapping time comes when the days are just above freezing and the nights go just below freezing. And historically, here in Minnesota, the transition between winter and spring was a lot more gradual than it is now, where now all of a sudden we'll have snowy days and then it'll be 80 degrees in the middle of spring. And having those shifts with temperature and the rapidness of how they're changing is making the maple sap season run really short. And in some cases, maybe not at all, or maybe the trees only provide a small amount of sap. And so that having that be disrupted disrupts all of our ceremonies involved with tapping maple trees, with all of our community gathering events, with harvesting the sap, making the sugar, making the syrup. So we have to think of different creative things, different plant relatives to rely upon, different ways of working with our plant relatives that maybe we didn't do before. Like at our farm this season, we experimented with eating bean leaves and squash leaves, which is something that we didn't really do in prior seasons. But
How did those taste?
Yeah, no.
they're not my favorite personally, but I'm still trying to learn how to eat different things as well.
Trial and error.
Nothing can
squash-
replace maple sugar or maple syrup. Yeah.
Yeah, but just kind of adapting to different possibilities, or maybe looking at different resources that we've been overlooking. Just trying to find ways to still do our ceremonies, practice our cultures, still be collaborative and be together, but having to find new ways of doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm from Arizona, so there's no way that we can possibly tap a saguaro cactus, you know. It's, you know.
Yeah.
No, it's one of those things where, like, for example, when it comes to food sovereignty, the tribes in Arizona, they have to fight with the animals. That's one thing when they harvest saguaro fruit or prickly pear or even the nopales. They have to battle with the animals. So when it comes to this you know, like the cliche saying circle of life type of thing, how do humans in your societies kind of deal with working with animals and fighting with animals? Is that a factor?
Yeah. Well, I was told by somebody who runs a farm that you plant for the animals. Like, they're gonna come eat, they need to eat too. Like, you plant an extra row or two for them to eat, and then you have your own harvest.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
try to grow our food at the farm with those relatives in mind, all of the non-human relatives.
Yeah.
A lot of them are struggling and experiencing climate grief as well, kind of the exact same things that we're experiencing. Maybe they've got a favorite food that's very similar to us with the maple trees, that having that not be available for them is causing disruptions in, like, the deer society.
Yeah.
And so the deer are at the farm, they're eating plants that they've never eaten before. Like, deer typically don't like to eat onions, but this year, with the drought and everything, they're trying new foods because they're desperate for water and nutrients. So we try to respond to that and respect that we're trying to provide for them too. It's a delicate balance, and we're constantly having to try new things and learning lessons the hard way sometimes to try to figure them out.
Yeah. When Navajos like wild onions, so when the sheep go out, they smell their breath to see if it smells like onions, and then they ask, where were the sheep? And they say, oh, they were on the east side of the hill. So we would go there and pick the wild onions. You know, that's how we used to find our onions. And I think we still do that now. I'm not sure, because I live in the city now. I don't know how that goes. So,
Well, here in the city, I think often we see our four-legged, our, insects, even some of our plant relatives as burdensome.
for sure, yeah.
I hear a lot of discourse around weeds, but, shout out to the, Hope Flanagan, who kind of opened me to, these are relatives that don't know the rules of this land. So, like, how do we reimagine, buckthorn, that's not everybody's favorite thing, but, it has it's part of this land, it's part of us now. In talking about, like, having animals in an urban area, I can't help but think that is something we're winning in the climate fight. It's good that, we have our four-leggeds in our city. It shouldn't be deprived of life. It should be flourishing. I personally want to be somewhere where, there's life all around me.
All I can think of right now is that Destiny has the best seat on this panel right now, because my legs are
shade.
burning.
No take backs. No take backs.
Yeah, right.
I was just venting. So now I think it's time, if anybody in the audience has any questions for the four panelists here, I would please urge you to ask them, because they are experts in their field. I simply admire them because I'm clearly nobody. And they're a wealth of knowledge as far as food systems, as far as anything that we're talking about today, because all I do is cook. That's about it. So please, anyone, I implore you.
I've got the mic over here. If anybody has a question, you can raise your hand. I can come to you. Anyone? Shy Minnesotans? Can speak up. Have questions?
Don't be shy.
That's an amazing shirt, by the way.
And
I don't even have a star
what's
for
your name?
today.
Okay, Tori's got a question.
So, with everything that's going on program-wise that the Native community is doing and coming back into the cities with, how are the youth being brought into food sustainability, community, keeping the local shop small, keeping the money into the community and keeping things together? How are the youth contributing and well, I don't want to use contributing, but how are they participating in growing and learning and sustaining and reaching out to others to show those of us who aren't part of the Native community that everything is possible and equitable and worthy to pursue?
That's a really great question. Who wants to tackle that one?
Well, at NACC, we're partnering with the U of M and the Indigenous Food Network on, it's called BRAID, and it's a youth. We're working with the schools in Minneapolis and St. Paul on bringing Indigenous food to the youth, and then also physical fitness. We have the Native lacrosse. So we had a pilot at Ames School in St. Paul last summer. Hope Flanagan was one of the teachers I brought in. We brought in for teaching the plant medicines and harvesting plants and tasting plants. We gave them exposure to wild rice pancakes that was harvested in Red Lake, and we did lacrosse. John Hunter was out there every day running, or had the kids running and playing the games, and they could not wait for Wednesdays and Thursdays to be with us and be learning all these things and teaching about water and just like how sacred everything around us is. And it's just they're eager and starving for the information, and they just get it. They get it right away, and it's an amazing position to be in and to be involved with that. And yeah, so that's what NACC is doing with organizations in the community.
You know, when I was in culinary school, I had some kids come to a class of mine, and I asked them to draw a chicken, just to get their frame of mind. And all of them drew
A drumstick?
a viscerated frozen chicken. They didn't even do the five, trace trace their hand. And the knowledge of this was 12 years ago. Now times are changing. People, the youth are really getting involved with food and gardening and food systems. And I think it's a really good change, because there are some kids who don't even know that a carrot comes from the ground, and they think it comes from the store. So, how do you feel, Destiny, about the youth and their involvement with food systems?
I think it's amazing, especially in South Minneapolis. I believe there's so many organizations that we work with that have a youth aspect associated to it. I know that Dream of Wild Health has a youth camp. We've run plant lessons through our urban farm. And we often have communities throughout the summer, or communities and groups throughout the summer that bring in their youth to our farmers market. And it's really amazing, and it's something that really brightens up our vendors' days to be able to pass along this information that they have to all of these young kids who are really interested and excited to be there. And I think that that's something that I think is really inspiring. I was a really apathetic teenager, and so like to imagine that there's all of these kids that are really excited to learn and to grow their Indigenous knowledge is like really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for you, Joe? Or go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say at Dream of Wild Health, we definitely have a strong commitment to our youth. So our youth don't just come in one season and then they go out and they never see us again. We typically have the youth stay with us from very young ages all the way through like when they finish high school. And throughout that process, if they have an interest in like the farmer's market or they want to get into making things like dried teas to sell at the market, we have programs that help train the kids and get them into internships with our partnering organizations once they grow up or get old enough to do so.
You have any thoughts, Joe?
Absolutely. Like, you just heard like a long list of like great programming that are happening. Please, like, invest in that because it really is changing the game. But really, the youth program us. Like, there is so much energy in defending the land and being a part of the land. You know, that's what we saw with Roof Depot, where a lot of our supporters, a lot of our leaders are just young people that just threw down against the city, and that's how we were successful, and that's how we will be successful. Like, I'm getting gray hairs. The fight is a young person's thing, and, they are more than ready to stand up and fight and really reclaim back what is rightfully ours.
Very nice.
Sure.
Any other questions?
We've got another question here in the audience from Zach.
How you doing, Zach?
Hi, good. So I'm not native, but like I'm into seed saving and stuff. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of like traditional varieties of stuff are in the seed collections of, people who aren't native. So like, what kinds of stuff are you doing to bring some traditional like crop varieties back to the community and stuff?
I'll give that to you.
Yeah. At Dream of Wild Health, we have a seed rematriation program. We had an elder who helped start our organization about 25 years ago who had a bundle of traditional heirloom tribal varieties of seeds that she's been keeping in her family for a long time, and she didn't have any descendants, grandkids, kids of her own that really wanted to maintain the traditions. So she gave those seeds to the organization, and we've been receiving gifts of seeds from other people, other people throughout the nation since then. And so we've got a portion of our farm that's specifically dedicated just to growing out these traditional varieties of like corn, tobacco, really runs the gamut. And then we help return those seeds to their original communities so they can get back into the hands of their original stewards.
In Arizona, there's an organization called Native Seed Search. Have you heard of them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they store a lot of heirloom seeds and things in that capacity. So they really do a good job at. I don't know. I don't want to say cataloging because we work to decolonize things. So when you do a catalog of something, it's almost just for preservation. But if you do want a seed of a certain corn variety or anything, you can just call them up and it's you have full access to it. So that's one good resource as far as I know. Anybody want to also put in on that one?
We've got a couple more questions out here.
Okay.
What's your name?
Doug.
Doug has a question.
How you doing, Doug?
Good. I was just curious what your stance is, or if you have an opinion on food grown in a greenhouse. And the reason I ask is I'm currently working on a very large greenhouse project for the MHA Nation in North Dakota, and it's quite interesting. But I was wondering, does that connect with food sovereignty?
So he's asking about food grown in a greenhouse.
Oh.
I could speak on that too.
Okay.
We actually do raise some of our food in a greenhouse, at least for a portion of the season. It definitely helps here in Minnesota, since we don't have as long of a growing season, to start some of our plants in the greenhouse, like say April or May, before it's safe for them to go outside. So we do that. And we've also partnered with other greenhouses in the metro. We did a partnership with Dowling Elementary this past spring to grow some native plants that we distributed in the community. And our farm right now is 10 acres. It's located in Hugo, just north of White Bear Lake. But we've expanded another 20 acres, and we are going to be having our own large greenhouse there, where we're going to be doing a lot more innovations for greenhouse to help with food sovereignty, including possibly even growing greens in the winter. Yeah, we're not quite at that stage, but definitely using greenhouses to help with sovereignty.
We've got one more question
more
over
question,
here.
okay.
And what's your name?
Karen.
Karen has a question.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, this is quick. So, NACDI has an urban farm. Where is it?
It's located off of the Greenway. I believe the address is on 28th and 17th Avenue. So if you visit our booth, we have our address specifically for the NACDI farm there. And it's an urban farm and a green, but mostly a community green space. So we have plots for people to start their own growing, as well as plots that our farm manager, Gloria, maintains that contain a lot of heirloom vegetables as well as indigenous vegetables. And we try to redistribute the things that we grow in the garden back to the community.
I have a question. As we know, there's a lot of disparities in our indigenous communities with wealth and resources. Is there community outreach and education about eating healthy whole foods on a budget when you don't have a whole paycheck kind of budget? That's my name for Whole Foods, my whole paycheck. So, are there resources for that?
I can speak on this. I think that's something that we try to do at the farmers market is we try to invite a cook or a chef monthly to kind of introduce ways that you can use some of the market staples that we have that are usually pretty affordable and how to incorporate them into your life.
Like squash leaves.
Yeah, like squash leaves, which is also something that I learned while taking a class at Dream of Wild Health, is that I could eat those, which I didn't know before. So I feel like it's another collaborative effort in which we're all trying to find different ways that we can kind of get back to the community, that there are ways to introduce nutrition into your life that don't necessarily have to break the bank. And I think that that's something that we are always trying to do while working with NACC and within the Indigenous Food Network in general.
You know, what's interesting is when I entered the food world, I used to live in Phoenix, and I used to go shopping and spend $80, and I used to get a lot of food. Now I spend $80, it's just one bag. But this is what food sovereignty is all about. It's having the ability to make your choice on what you want to eat and doing it your own way without any type of regulation. Would that be a good synopsis for that?
We got to do something about that regulation, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I really want to thank all of you for listening to us, banter for an hour. I want to thank Anthony, Joe, Destiny, and Natchez for being here. My name is Freddie Bitsoie. I am the chef-in-residence for Natives, and I will be here for probably 2 more months. And maybe they'll extend my contract, hint, hint. But it's been a real pleasure, and I've really had a good time listening to these 4 experts, because if you need any resource in the area, please reach out to the 4 of these wonderful people, and because they know clearly a lot more about life than I do. So, okay? Thank you so much.